going to run through, this is mostly no-till type, that quality no-till. It kind of follows up on those slides that I jumped past real quick, and you were trying to see get a preview, right? So, then I'll still be around the rest of the day for even other questions that are maybe more cover crop specific, because I have used cover crops for a long time. Even before we bought our farm 23 years ago, every job I ever had through my government, my NRCS job, we always had no-till and cover crop plots all the way back to 1983. So it was kind of like we were doing a lot of testing, and I was working with farmers and having on-farm plots all the way back then. And I was fortunate in that I went to Western Kentucky University, which most of you don't know anything about Western. I went there to play baseball just by happenstance instead of Purdue, like most of the people in Indiana. But at Western Kentucky University, they're on that karst topography, that red clay, very fragile environment, a lot of dairy farms back then. And in 1979, I was on my first trip to the university farm, and Dr. J.P. Worthington took our crops class out to the university farm in the spring of the year, and he was no-tilling silage corn into hairy vetch cover crop in 1979. So that was my first experience, and I go, well, that's pretty cool. So I kind of was interested from that point forward. Was that?
That's a tough crop to no-till, and if you don't till it back, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it was the corn planter. I don't know if any of you older folks ever remember them. It was a 3-point hitch, 4-row. It was blue and cream. I think it was a Cole was the brand name. Cole planter was what it was. You don't ever see those anymore, but anyway, that was kind of my beginning with no-till and cover crops was back in 1979. So anyway, let's go through just kind of some stuff and kind of stop. Here's what we're trying to get done. I've already covered that, but now we're going to talk about how are we going to get some of these and how are we going to focus. I'm going to focus mostly on what I would call quality no-till. This one right up here. That's where we're going to start, okay? So the goal for most no-till and most planting in general, especially corn and crops like corn, there's new research that even would suggest beans are more responsive to this than we ever thought. So our goal of that unit right there, that planting unit, is every seed exactly the same depth, in exactly the same environment, with access to the exact same resources, especially through the first 30 days, okay? And think back to what we talked about in that starter fertilizer and stuff. So this planter, your goal, whether it's conventional or no-till, it's the same goal. And why do you want that? Why do you want that right there? You want every seed to come up the same day. You want every seed to grow at the same rate and have access to the same resources, okay? So that's all resources. So be thinking in the background of what that means. Add that.
Was there row cleaners on that one? Here, it looked like row cleaners maybe?
Yeah, there's row cleaners on that one too, but some planters have row cleaners and some don't, and this is why. What is it that you're planting into? Is that row cleaner more of a hindrance than a help? Maybe it is. But I'm just going to suggest no matter what color, no matter what configuration, and what cover you're planting into, even maybe asphalt. I've seen some of these planters today are capable of planting every seed exactly the same depth, and you can come very close if you consider the whole system to get every seed in exactly the same environment and provide exactly the same resources at the same time. Okay, so keep those goals and objectives, and what is it that we're going to do with this planter to make this happen, okay? Here's what we're after, is the picket fence stand. We want every seed to come up exactly the same time, be spaced exactly the same distance, and grow at the same rate. If we do not, I work with a lot of farmers and a lot of researchers too that say, Well, we just can't get no-till to perform, you know, it just can't keep up. And almost always you can either trace it back to that nutrient equation that we talked about earlier, or we can talk it to is their planting system set up? Because guess what? If your emergence happens, what's this, anybody can read this up here, but planting emergence study, 8.9 bushels loss on plants emerged after the first day. You want them to come up not just over the same week, you want them to come up the same day, if you can at all. That's not always easy, but that means you've got to do whatever you can preparation-wise to give the even environment for these seeds to be in at the same time, okay? So why does depth matter so much in this? Seed to soil contact. What other factors are at play? Why depth is so important in getting every seed to come up the same day? Moisture, temperature. If I've fall chiseled, and if I run a disc, and then I run a field cultivator before I plant, if I plant seed, if I drop seed anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches, is there much difference in the moisture or temperature? In a tilled seed bed, believe it or not, there's not much difference. Because that's one of the things that field cultivator, it's running 3 inches deep. It runs the day before you plant, and in about 12 hours, moisture and temperature is about the same in that field cultivated path. And you're going to place your seed somewhere in there, so your likelihood of putting it in the same temperature and moisture is pretty good, and your odds of then it germinating and coming up is pretty good. That's why when farmers go from conventional to no-till, they don't understand how much difference that varies, even at a 1/2 inch depth difference. So if you plant some of your seeds 1 inch deeper than others, they may come up on 3 to 5 days later. You may have a perfect stand if you go back 2 weeks later, but those seeds may have come up over a 5-day period, and you've already lost as much as 10, 15, 20 bushels and don't even know why, other than you're going to blame it on no-till. That much we know for sure, right? It couldn't have been my fault. It had to be that damn no-till, you know. So know this and be emphatic that every seed does the things, meets the goals, okay? So we have to reinvest in new technology if you're going to be into a no-till. I always tell farmers, when you go to no-till, don't think that's an immediate equipment savings. I immediately want to take whatever you were paying on your field cultivator, the tractor, the fuel, the labor, everything, I want you to reinvest it in that planter and in that whole planting operation if it's not already there, okay? So technology helps. This is a big play difference. Now we can actually see on the go in real time what that planter is doing, how the performance is. So that's a major thing. Yes, that's a little bit of money, but a lot of the same precision you can spend just on the planter itself that really per row and per acre is not all that expensive. You can get a lot of the planting technology on your planter with very little per acre investment compared to what you were spending in a tillage operation, okay? You gotta collaborate and know your soils, find out what it is. So every seed in exactly the same environment. What that means is your planting operation starts last fall. And those folks that are using cover crops, I'm very emphatic on this right here. I said, if you're not distributing your residues out the back of your combine, you're not going to get an even emergence in your cover crop. And if you're not going to get an even emergence in your cover crop, then you're not going to plant your cash crop in the same environment. Your cover crop's going to be uneven. Your moisture's going to be uneven. Your temperature's going to be uneven. And you will absolutely lose yield if that's not the case. So the first place you have to start is you have to be able to spread whatever width your grain platform is in the fall. You have to spread that residue, not just the full width, but evenly across the full width. And really, most combines today can do it, okay? if you're only having to spread, 20 foot, it's just a matter of adjusting and doing some things inside the back of the combine. You can make that do it pretty good. Adding a chaff spreader to the back of your combine is not all that expensive. Newer combines, they've got everything from power cast. They've got all kinds of add-on that if it's a bigger, wider, we can throw that residue a long way with some of the add-ons now that we know we need to. It's just an engineering thing, and the one thing I know for sure, if a farmer knows he needs something, they will build it if they don't have it. This is engineering problems are easy to fix, because all we got to know is we got to know we need it. Once we need it, somebody will build it, okay, and then somebody will market it, and we'll be able to get this done. But this is just knowing that you need to do it is really critical, okay? And you notice Phil Needham, he's a good friend, and I've spent a lot of time with him over the years. I still consider him one of the best residue management specialists that there is out there. He's a English guy that came over from England, but he's really a tremendous wheat specialist. I don't know, anybody know Phil Needham? You probably know. If you don't have his wheat book, then you're missing yield probably on wheat. And he's got the best no-till parts for it. If you got a John Deere drill, you need to know that needhamag.com. And I'm not getting any payback from him whatsoever. I'm just telling you, I go where I know he understands how to help me, and he does. So I rely on him heavily. But he's really a specialist. He understands, because he comes from England, where for years they're trying to grow 150 to 200 bushel wheat. And that's a lot of straw, and it's got to be spread. So they demand over there these good spreaders on the back of combines. Okay? Other residue, we've got add-ons now. We can manage our corn residue as well. And so managing that residue and making sure it's as even as it possibly can be wherever it is. And then there's a lot of different options out there. I'm not a big fan of this right here at all. It requires a lot of extra power. It doesn't necessarily evenly distribute the residue. For a pure no-till system, now this is just my preference. I'll find people, this will be a big debate like a lot of things. I don't want confetti. And I've known Marion Calmers for years and years and years. His older rolls are the ones I like, that pinched and broke the stalk but left it intact, left it attached. When I go through with a no-till drill, I'm okay with those stalks still being attached. I don't want a bunch of confetti on my hills that wash to the lowest part of the field. And the people that are worried about dissolved reactive phosphorus, nothing's a greater contributor than confetti out of your residues that float down to where the low part of the field is. And what's in the low part of the field? A riser. Now all that soluble phosphorus, the first few rains after this comes out, goes right down the tile and goes right out, and through no filtration whatsoever, goes right out into the creeks and streams. So I'm not a fan of confetti. If I was a strip till farmer, I would be. I would be more excited about that. But I like the ones that pinch it like this right here. See that? That's his old roll, and this is, you can buy these, and you've got, Case IH comes with something very similar to this that doesn't cut it, but it breaks it to let infection and let the fungus start breaking these stalks down, but it doesn't necessarily break it loose from. I do like the slow down kit of his that isn't snapping that off. I want as much of that corn stalk still attached as I can. Now, what's my other logic why I want those corn stalks either standing or still attached? What's another play in a no-till system that I want it right there still attached and up?
Equals a cold seed bed, a blanket on the surface.
Did everybody hear that? If you make confetti out of it, it makes a cold, wet blanket over the surface, and you're in cold weather country, and I want those stalks standing. One, I want to collect snow, okay? but I also, in the spring of the year, I want that standing, some of that stock standing, because it'll act like a wick and it'll actually let moisture out rather than just be a wet mess.
Try and pick as tall as you can.
I run my head as high as I possibly can, and just make the guys that hunt with me just madder than can be. I said, I can't hardly walk through your fields, you know. Yeah. So I want to irritate them, and I know I've done a good job if I irritate them, okay? So this is all part of your no-till system that we're starting. We're building it in the fall, right? This is the fall operation. And there's all different kinds to look at and different, I've got lots of different pictures. But see how just that little break's enough to let the infection get in there and let the microbes start breaking that down, okay? And then if I come in and I drill my cover crop, I've further infected, broken that up, and then now the cover crop is actually going to be a kind of a travel mechanism for the microbes, and it actually finishes breaking down even more of the stalks by spring. So cycling stalks, once you're in this system very long, cycling stalks is not, that's the last of your problem. You'll try to find ways to keep more stalks on your field.
Are you forced then to drill your cover crop versus just broadcast over the top?
I choose to drill my cover crop because I want that even stand so badly.
Okay.
Now, if I were up here where you are, I would be very inclined to aerial seed my cover crop just from a timing, but because of your relation with the lakes, you're just almost automatically going to get those September rains that'll bring it up. We don't always. We don't get lake effect moisture in the fall of the year like you do, and you're just far more likely to get a flown on cover crop to come up reliably than we are. I would too if I was up. I know I would if I was up here. Okay? So, God, I've got enough pictures of that. You got that figured? You see that? Okay, there is where I have flown it on before, but so it's just a matter of on a lot of these, it's adjusting the fins so that it spreads. I don't know how many guys, I'll just stop them. I've known people in my county so long, and they'll be out there, and I'll see they're just windrowing their bean stubble, and I'll just go out there and say, stop, let me get my wrench, and all I got to do is adjust those fins, and now all of a sudden it's spreading the full width, and they weren't at all worried about it. And I said, you're going to try to no-till, or you're trying to get a cover crop established in that. Let's get that spread. It's so easy. It doesn't cost anything, So
The bottom picture is what we want?
this is showing. Now, this is something that I forgot to mention. Out west, especially in wheat country, I talk to them a lot about that. Is wind. Wind is a major play. They have to adjust they've got automatic in-cab adjustments. Do you guys have those? That you just got to remember to throw it and play it for the wind. I don't either. But wind is not as big an issue. Now, it might be for you guys up here, though. I mean, you actually probably get more wind than we do. Okay? The other thing is, he always says, does it say on here? You always start your field and you cut on the down, let me think about that. You cut it on the upwind side so that your residue that is blowing is going over and you're actually redistributing it. And I think that's it's kind of a Kansas strategy. Anyway, in addition to that, you got to spread the residue. Okay, so you got to spread the residue, but you've got to also spread the weight. Okay, and so what other operation is going on in the fall? What other piece of equipment is running in the fall? Grain cart. And I don't have a picture, but so you guys have almost everybody runs a grain cart, right? And so you've all read the manual on the grain cart, right?
Not really a manual guy.
I've been all through the manual. You know what I can't find in the manual, but I know it's in there someplace because I know you guys all read the manual. It does not say in that grain cart manual, this device must be driven over every square inch of every field every year, every fall. And oh, by the way, don't ever drive this unless it's absolutely full. It doesn't, I can't find it in there, but I know it has to say it or guys wouldn't be out. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm amazed how many people just pay no attention. That grain cart's just going everywhere. And I'm just telling you, when you go to a no-till, if you're really emphatic on the no-till, that grain cart's tires need to be running in the, there's a reason they set those at the same width as a combine, same width. So you can drive right in that same pass, because which pass causes the most compaction? The first one. So the second one might as well be running in that. Now, the really, like the Dan DeSetters, the really people who are really anal about, little OCD, they arrange their fields and their harvest strategy so that the grain cart is only ever being filled on the way back to the truck. Huh? But you should do that, right? I mean that's critical, that you're not carrying that weight any more than you absolutely have to. And if anybody ever pulls a semi out in that field with those little bitty tires and that really heavy, they ought to be just, slapped around or something. I don't know. But so weight and fall, this is no-till now. You're not going to fix it with tillage. So you have to be thinking about all those things. All that leads to, I'm wanting every seed in exactly the same environment. Okay, see how emphatic, how anal I can be on this? So there's all kinds of setups, all kinds of technologies, everything from, I don't know how much Perot, has anybody priced one of the new harvesters? Anybody got one of these?
Yep. This will be here in about 2 weeks.
Whew. Can I come up and watch it run? If you're an equipment geek or a planter geek, gives me a coon dog chill, they call it, down in French Lick. You guys don't have coon hunters up here, right? And everything. It's when that dog gets a good scent, he goes, he does that. That's a coon dog chill. So we can plant in any environment. I'm satisfied, and my planter's pretty old. I mean, it's pretty old technology, and for pretty inexpensive planters, we can get them to do just about whatever we want them to do. Starter, I already talked earlier how important starter is. If starter's important, it's important that you know how much is going on each row, and it's, once again, equal access to equal resources at the same time. So if you're going to be putting starter on, put it on evenly in every row, okay? Makes a difference, okay? As you're trying to do it. In my starter, I used to always make sure I had about 30 units of N in my starter. Now that I no-till into cover crops, and many years it's my only nitrogen, I'll put 50 to 70 units of N depending on how big the cover crop got. But it will almost always have, I'll use thiazole at about a 5%, so I get my sulfur right there too. So I've got everything that plant needs to start making amino acids and making its protein. Huh? 28 or 32 is my go-to, because I'm getting that nitrate nitrogen that I know my plant can outcompete for. Now there'll be a lot of plant physiologists that will say, oh, but corn really uses less energy if you can get it ammonium nitrogen, and yes, that's correct. But in that early, where competition is everything, and those first feeders to the trough are out there, they're wanting ammonium too. That nitrate source is what Dean Martins came up with. That young corn plant can actually outcompete for the nitrate form of nitrogen more than the ammonium form of nitrogen. And once again, this is less of an issue the number of years that you're in this system. But now that I've added a lot of cover crops, I've always got something there that's really, really hungry for a lot of the soil supplied nitrogen. So I still, in many years, like after wheat, if I have wheat in a rotation and I've got a really robust cover crop mix, then the starter nitrogen may be all the nitrogen that crop really needs. And it goes right back to what Alan talked about earlier, is that soil is so biologically active that it is just going to supply. And I'll just tell you, you can try to force feed it your own nitrogen all you want, Nature wants that relationship. They want that biologically delivered nitrogen. Your corn plant's going to go after that. That's what it wants. So there's no reason to over apply nitrogen, but you do still need that early nitrogen, and through the planter is the easiest way to get it done.
No side dress, you're putting it all in the planter.
Yeah, and depending on the field, side dress, put a third to a half on with the planter, and side dress the rest at about V4, V5.
With the Coulter.
And that's what works at most of the studies I've seen across, and Purdue just came out with a new study just this, I saw it just for the first time this month at conferences. They reconfirmed that starter plus side dress at V5. And that's when you put your rest. They can't, in the no-till, they're not finding late nitrogen application necessary because what's providing late nitrogen in this system? The biology is providing that. That cover crop's starting to break down and all those kinds of things. So they starter plus early side dress, and that's when all your nitrogen program's on. Okay? Monitoring, you still, even though you've got all this equipment in the cab, you still got to get off every once in a while and make sure everything's, doing what you think it's doing. I love planters today, with all the equipment that we've got. If you want to sneak up on a farmer, I tell people, I said, if you want to sneak up on a farmer, come out on his right side, because that's where he's got all of his screens and everything. Television, I don't know what, there's everything in there now, But, so we've got all this technology. Use it to help you do the very best job of getting, it's that active downforce is available on a lot of planters, and so that's kind of a game changer, especially on big planters. I got in big trouble out at No-Till on the Plains. I was showing all this stuff about these active downforce and computer monitors and all this kind of stuff, and I got almost yelled at by this person on the front row, and she says, you're just saying that the only way to do this is if you're a rich big farmer. And I said, no, really not. I've got a 6-row planter and it's, guess what, 20 years old. Now it has a lot of that new equipment on it, but you don't have to spend a lot. But boy, I got scolded hard on that. So just because I'm showing some of these pictures doesn't mean that, this capability, a lot of this, even without this, what the next best thing to all this technology to know exactly how much downforce you need is, and what the next most important control on your planter is? It's right up there in the cab, and it's got this jackrabbit and tortoise on it. I don't know what that's about, but if I pull back toward the tortoise, I suddenly get much more consistent depth control on my old planter. 4.2 miles an hour. We did it. That's the optimum. That's the fastest you could go without giving up depth control on our soils. So anyway, so you monitor it, and now you are sure that you placed every seed exactly the same depth. Okay, so it is a real game changer, especially on larger equipment. Okay, pneumatic. Big debate over these, especially as you're in cover crops. Most of the people that I work with, the culture's long gone. All that culture did was pull up wet soil, and it stuck to your gauge tires and messed up your depth control. Okay. Now, if I'm offending, so I'll offend somebody. Remember Ray Rawson? Is he in the room? Ray had 3 cultures, and man, it was great. You were tilling up, and you were running 3, and it was great. And we tried that at home, and all that did was make our gauge tires a muddy mess. But so now we don't even have any coulters, because if you take the coulter off and let this do the cutting, all your down pressure is focused on that as a cutting, and guess what? It's a pretty good cutter. If it's not also if this parallel linkage isn't also having to push a wavy coulter, think about the surface area of a wavy coulter, and you're pushing that in the soil, and cutting that through cover crop residue, you're having almost double the amount of total surface area that now that parallel linkage, you have to have enough down pressure to get that done. So we just take that off and make sure these absolutely are floating, so that if they're floating, they're not working against my parallel linkage that's pushing the planter down. Follow me? So floating row cleaners, if you're planting into a lot of different cover, you've got to have those treader wheels. Those are not depth control bands, by the way. Years ago, I went down to Howard Martin's farm, and I was calling those depth control wheels. And I said, do you have to have those? And he says, well, he said, you know, the only reason I ever put those on there was so that it stopped the wrapping. He said, those were never a depth control wheel. But if I can sell more of these and guys think it's a depth control wheel, I'll sell them as a depth control wheel. Howard was quite the capitalist. You know, he didn't care why you wanted those as long as you wanted them. But that does help wrapping. And then I'll show a picture here in a minute probably, but there's all different kinds of these, but any kind of cover crops, the more of those that you have, more of those shark tooth design is probably better. And they don't wrap as bad, and they clean themselves a lot better, and those kinds of things, okay? And I, of course, do like this pneumatic, so that mostly because I can just pull it all the way out of the ground. Most of my cover crops, if I'm in heavy cover crops, I don't need those. I need them all the way up more than I need them at all, okay? Less is more sometimes. Closing wheels, we've done, I work, Mike Starkey's just right up the road from me, and Mike and I, not Mike and I, but Mike and A.J. Atkins mostly, but I've been to a lot of his field days and stuff and talked to him a lot. They've tried almost every kind of closing apparatus that there is, and I'm just going to tell you, if somebody tells you they've got the perfect apparatus for you on your farm and they've not seen your soil and they don't know your system, they're misleading you. You're going to have to try closing wheels that work the best in the residue that you've got and the soil that you've got, because they're just going to be different. And that's why there are so many different ones. In our part of the world, I have two criteria that I want, because I'm almost always planting in cover crops. I want a heavy closing wheel. Okay, I want cast of some sort. And you're going to laugh at me. More times than not, I'm running the old original cast iron closing wheels. They don't bind up in anything. I don't have to have any spring tension on them whatsoever because they're heavy. The weight alone closes the slot. I like this Dawn because it's heavy. It closes the slot, and it does a little better kneading sometimes if the soil's a little bit moist, breaks the sidewall down a little bit more if you're planting moist. I'm not a big enough farmer. I'm just going to plant when soil's right. So the cast iron closing wheel does the very best for me most cases. But I do keep some of these others around for when things do. If it would get really wet, I might keep some of those around and run some of those. I had those, that's all I ran for a long time, was the Martin, kind of that new till with the drag chain. But the reason I'm focusing on heavy is because it's a sheer physics thing, and I don't know if I've got a better picture somewhere. Okay, so here's what's providing the down pressure, right? Here it is. If I have to bear down on spring tension back here, a long way from here, anybody remember their physics class? It's got a lot of leverage that you're working against this. And even if you've got active down pressure, too much pressure back here will cause this thing to wear itself out trying to keep the right adjustment, because this is, from a leverage standpoint, very good at pulling this out of the ground. So I want the weight of the closing wheel to close my slot more than spring tension. Okay, that's just a physics thing that I like. Now, if I was willing to spend some of the money, this is very good in cover crops, this setup. It actually combines the old Case IH philosophy with some new, that shark tooth and some of that actually, because the Case IH works pretty good. It's an underused planter in my opinion, especially no-tilling into cover crops. But that concave and then that bigger diameter and the notch blade, it works really good in a lot of cover crops in our silt loam soils. I should always qualify. Everything I use, I'm talking about mostly silt loam soils. Sandy soils are just going to be different, okay? The other thing that I still do, I don't have, if you don't have active downforce, and I would suggest if you have any heavy soils, if you've got heavy soils, I still like the reduced inner diameter gauge tire that Precision talked about 20 years ago, not recently. But I still run on my silt loam soils reduced inner diameter gauge tires so that I'm not carrying the weight of the planter right on the seed slot, right where I want. I don't want the densest soil on my farm around my seed. If I was planting in sand, I would have a different mentality there. So know your soil, and I would say many of you probably have pretty sandy soils. Am I right in that? So you're going to have, that's probably not going to be the same issue for you. This is probably the gauge tire that you want, okay? So just in cover crops, make sure you got nothing. Here we go. Cast irons, guess what? They don't catch on anything. Guess what? They catch on everything. You know, some of the spider spoke closing wheels catch on everything and wrap, and then it's a total quagmire and a total mess. Okay? So just know what cover you're planting into. Then that starter delivery system, a lot of the cover crop people are doing this because that coulter up front that's delivering starter fertilizer is, once again, it's another thing that can catch and wrap and cause problems in that cover crop if you're planting into a lot of cover crops. So a lot of guys have gone to this. And the thing I would say is I really do want my nitrogen below ground if I can get it. But most years, if you're planting into that into that cover crop residue, you're dropping that, you're dribbling that down on the surface, down below there's still a canopy up here. And it's kind of that, we get away with that in wheat production because there's not a wind blowing right across the surface that you just put that on. And it protects it from volatilization a lot more. And then generally you'll get a rain pretty quick that gets it down on each side of the plant, and that way it's accessible pretty quick. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on, I mean, not everybody has high phosphorus levels, so we're addressing that with a planter. And phosphorus doesn't really move that great in the soil, so a system like that, it would put it on top.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
I would want it in the ground if I was putting phosphorus.
So we're doing right.
Never ever put phosphorus. This is the new no-till rule that we have to live within with our water quality issues. Anytime we apply phosphorus, it needs to be in the ground, and that's the other reason to have starter fertilizer on, because it's a good way to, even if you get it 2 inches down, that's just way better than on the surface from a water quality standpoint. So yes, that's good, very good point. I don't apply phosphorus anymore, so I don't need to worry about that. But any other quick questions, comments?
Running a seed farmer?
Yeah, you can't, I don't know if I've got a picture. Well, I've got so many pictures, and they all look a lot like that. So I don't know if that is, I think that's Starkey's old planter is what that is. So, but seed firmer, and you can get the different length ones. I use the short one so that it doesn't collect as much moist soil or anything like that. But yes, a seed firmer, and that's even more important with my reduced inner diameter gauge tires, because the sidewall can crumble a little bit, and I want to make sure I firm that seed down before the sidewall crumbles. Okay? Yeah, Alan.
Barry, could you tell us why you made the statement that you don't use phosphorus fertilizer anymore?
Why? I thought I could just slide that through real easy. I listened. I had one of your colleagues sort of out that you'll know real well, Ray. no,
Sorry.
Ray Weil. Ray Weil was out, spent 4 whole days, and I got to spend 4 days with him in Indiana. And he was at meetings just like this, and he made the statement, he said, you Midwest people with these glaciated soils, he said, you realize you've got 3,500 pounds of phosphorus in the top foot of your soil? And of course, there's fertilizer dealers that have paid for the meal. And he said that just off the cuff, and because I was getting to ride with him between days and everything. I said, okay, Ray, are you sure we've got 3,500 total pounds? He said, oh, easily. He said, that might be conservative. He said, you've got an inherent rock phosphate in your soil. It's called apatite. He said, he went into the whole process about it. He says, it's just mostly not available in a tillage system. But if you're no-tilling and using cover crops, you're keeping all of that phosphorus in play, and you're constantly, the microbes are releasing more. And so you should never, ever have to apply phosphorus. And I go, even if I don't have a very high phosphorus soil test, he says the phosphorus soil test is irrelevant because it's based on a tillage system where a whole bunch of that gets refixed every year and is not plant available. So I just haven't applied phosphorus in a very long time, and I've never had a phosphorus deficiency. So
you do live in the land of milk and honey.
I'm just saying, know your soil, and everybody should know what is the inherent, keep in mind, I know that most of the roots are up here shallow, but you're sending enough roots down, especially in a long-term no-till plus cover crop, you're getting to reuse a lot of those root channels, and even a pretty young plant can get access to the resources that it needs through a path of least resistance pretty quick. And so if you're mineralizing and you've got some pretty good nutrient content down in the subsoil, you probably can get that plant accessing that, what it needs pretty quick most years, even though, yeah, you're not going to have as many roots, but you'll be able to put roots deep quick to get the resources, and they're getting moisture and down in that organic matter, and they're getting micronutrients. It goes on and on why a continuous no-till system works for us. Did that answer? Did I overdo it? Yes, I probably did.
Barry, hold on, Barry.
What? Who? Where?
Okay, so Barry's been no-tilling 20-some years, 23 years, right? So what about the people who don't no-till? They're not no-till, they're trying to no-till. Is that an option for these guys to just cut phosphorus like that in our cold soils?
I would say no.
Okay. Right?
It-
Like when you
it's
get to
that-
23 years, maybe you can cut your phosphorus.
If you've got a silt loam soil, maybe, but in sandy soils, no. Probably you don't have that inherent soil. Now, that's where you really need to know what is your subsoil, because you may not have any in your soil test, but your subsoil maybe has quite a bit of phosphorus. And if you can every year, even if you're not no-tilling, if you're using cover crops to go down and get that and keep that in play, if you're putting a cover crop down every year, just keep in mind, it's not going to let that phosphorus refix. It's going to take it up itself and hold it in an organic state until you terminate it next spring. So you can get some of these benefits, but sandy soils by their very nature aren't as high in native phosphorus, if you will. Am I right? Alan knows probably could go in way more depth on that than I can. It even goes back to what kind of clay do you have even can make a difference. And that's a bigger difference in potash, a bigger play in potash, isn't it? Alan, you get?
Fertility that's went through a plant is like the most plant available form of that fertility, right?
Absolutely. That's why, if you can keep it in that organic state, keep it assimilated in a living thing, as that living thing cycles it, dies, whatever, it keeps it in that nice plant available state for whatever comes along next. And so that's why this system works so well.
So what CECs are you working with?
ECs? CECs. CECs, if I'd have told you when my organic matter was 2.5, if you looked in the old soil survey, it would probably say it was about a 10 or 12, and now it's about 16 or 17, because it was the organic matter that brought the CEC up. but it's a silt loam soil. Typical silt loam soils will have a CEC, an inherent CEC in the 12 range, 10 or 12. Sand is not going to be that. Yeah. But how do you bring sand up is with organic matter, is how you bring CEC up.
Absolutely. In years and years.
It doesn't happen like that. It doesn't, but that's why you got to stay on it. Any other, want to add to that, Alan? Any?
No, you covered it well. I think that just to really, that the biological cycling affects phosphorus availability as well.
Absolutely.
We don't have as much information on that, but I think that that's where you knowing that you have phosphorus in your soil and using the biology to keep it cycling, that's where you can be more resource efficient.
Yeah, and you cut erosion to zero, and that's your other loss mechanism on phosphorus that you don't have to deal
We
with.
got lots of minerals in our soil, rocks,
Uh-huh.
so those are a little bit harder on stuff.
Yeah, you need really mean biology in your
Big
soil.
roots, yeah.
Big roots and big organisms.
Well, if
That,
it has good phosphorus levels, then even sandy soil, you're all right without phosphorus anyway, you know, if you got good sand.
Yep. All right. Just lots of pictures of lots of different things. Just don't drive by and, I mean, not to step on any vendors at conferences that help sponsor things, but there's a lot of things that you can hang on a planter out there, and I'm just going to say, understand the ultimate goals of the planter and understand your system, and only hang on it the least amount that it takes to accomplish those things. I still want my planter as light as it can possibly be, because I might want to plant a little moist. Okay?
So I'm looking there, you got your insecticide box tubes hanging there. So you're not using insecticides to kill biology then?
That mostly is used, I have a bit of vole issues sometimes, and so I've got those, I've changed the paddle wheels in there, and I can put zinc phosphide in my outside rows as I plant my end rows with some zinc phosphide, and that keeps them from creeping out of those grass field borders that I've got, and helps, it's one of my vole control. Actually, I don't even have to use that anymore hardly. So, and this is an old setup here. Cast iron wheels are back on, chains are gone. So it's I don't use in I can go down the road on the whole IPM, integrated pest management. I am a big believer. That is our next threshold in agriculture, is fully understanding what's been marketed to us. And I've got good friends that are seed dealers, and we have nice discussions over cold adult beverages, over why we should have some things and not have other things. People ask me, do you use seed treatments? I go, yes, I do. I put Rhizobium inoculant on my soybeans. I put a low rate of the old apron type fungicide to get my beans out of the ground, and that's all I need. That's all I could possibly ever need in my system. And that's only, that fungicide is only if I'm on my earliest beans. And he will mix up, he's got a mixing, he can put on it whatever I want. My latest thing, I will start using some of the biostimulants and some of those kinds of things. If I want to buy something to put on my seed, I want to put something on there that has a chance of doing good and no chance of unintended consequences against my beneficials.
Something that lasts for 7 days.
Huh?
Or not something that lasts for 7 days.
Uh-huh.
Kills biology in the process.
Yeah, it kills all your beneficials. It's very difficult. I mean, every entomologist in the Midwest signed on to a paper that says we can't figure out why in the world you would put a neonicotinoid insecticide on soybeans.
You can't buy it hardly without it.
You just aren't, there's nothing you're going after that it's going to get. It's just not going to help you. So take that money and inoculate your beans. If you're planting into big, tall cereal rye, guess what? It's very nitrogen deficient, that environment. So inoculating soybeans is not a bad play in this new environment of a very nitrogen deficient. You want it to start fixing nitrogen on its own as fast as you possibly can. So I inoculate, even though I've had beans forever, I still inoculate, and I still think I get a response from that most years in that really nitrogen deficient environment that I'm planting into. Yeah.
How about, we had a guy talk us into double inoculate, put twice as much. Is there any benefit into that? But last year we did every acre of soybeans that way.
I don't know is the short answer. The question is that it was recommended that they double the inoculant. All I can say is this: you absolutely are putting a little bit of biology into a dog-eat-dog major environment filled with things that want to eat it. So you're not going to hurt yourself, but there are also kind of multi-species inoculants that people are using too, and things like that. A bigger issue to me is I got to know who handled that inoculant, who took care of it, how'd they put it on, and where has this inoculant been, because it's a living thing. So if it's not alive when it gets to the soil, it's not doing me any good whatsoever. It's more about how is this inoculant. So like cover crop seed, I love my cover crop dealers and stuff, but pre-inoculated seed, and that means it's got a coating on it, and that means the pure live seed is nearly half real seed, and it's a lot of inert material. I want real seed, and I want my own inoculant that I've taken care of, and I know what its conditions have been, and I inoculate my own seed, and that way I get to pick the specific variety that's specific to that cover crop legume that needs that inoculant, and I've taken care of it, and I'm assuring that it's on every seed because I want it to make nitrogen for me, okay? So I'm about out of time, and I'm probably not even a third the way through. Planting green we were going to talk about. I don't know if this will play on its own or not. No. Anyway. I plant green in most of my corn and beans, and I already talked about that a little bit, is green doesn't mean it has to be this tall. Green is whenever the conditions are right to plant, it's time to plant. And I'm watching the weather forecast, I'm watching everything. But, and the longer you're in this system, the more flexible that becomes. And if things are right, like last year, it was really getting dry really early, and man, my cover crop wasn't near as big as I normally get. But I had a comfort in that I've built this system over a long period of time, and I didn't see any rain in the forecast. And that's where we're having that network. Man, we're on the phone and everybody's texting each other in the whole area, and everybody's saying, hey, my ground is dry, and I checked the temperature, and they're sending thermometer readings of 70-degree soil temperatures. And they said, I'm not seeing anything in the forecast. What are you guys thinking? And before the end of the day, planters were rolling. And when planters are rolling, that means sprayers are also rolling. And in our text string is also the local ag retailer and some crop consultants. And so the word spreads really quick. It's go time. And as a result, I would say the bulk of our county had record-breaking yields that had we let them go another week, we'd have got a rain, and then the cover crop would have been another 2 feet taller, and it would have used more moisture, and then we never got another rain for 6 weeks. And those guys probably suffered about a 20 bushel soybean yield and about a 40 bushel corn yield loss by waiting, when intuitively I might have waited also if I didn't have this network going crazy and everybody, it's go time, you know. Yep.
Do you ever terminate cover crop because of those same thought processes before you plant? We're a little colder up here, I was doing the same thing, I pulled the trigger on some of mine, but our soils were 70 degrees.
Yeah.
Just 'cause there's no rain, I didn't want to soak it up moisture.
I have before, but today I would say if it's time to kill my cover crop, it's probably time to plant. If I can get across it with a sprayer in the spring of the year, I can probably go to planting. I'm not afraid to plant beans pretty early, you know, so I'm not afraid at all to get the planter rolling or drill rolling at the same time, and that's pretty consistent. There's just almost none of us that kill it and hope it gets really dead before we plant anymore. We just, that extra growth, we've seen what it does for us, and if we can let that grow, it's just, we're confident enough that we're going to get that cover crop killed that it's not worrying us, and we can plant through it easier. Enough of us have been burnt enough times by a cover crop that is, you know, a cover crop that's that big. If you kill it and now it rains, that, you know, that up, if you look at that up close, it's, you know, it's about that tall, and now that's going to start falling over, turning yellow and turn into rope on us, and now it's really hard to plant into, and you don't want that. Hey, it started doing it on its own. Okay. So anyway, all these modifications, some guys put the crimpers on the planter. I haven't done that. And back to that, we've got all these devices that really help us plant green that wasn't an issue before. And if I was buying a bean planter today or a wheat air seeder, gosh, I was looking at this and man, is that a good looking planter, a good good air seeder. I mean, it's nice. The guys that are running those, they say they are brutal. They can take anything. So, not that I'm not a dealer for them either. So, anyway, should you crimp? Here's my philosophy on crimping. Hindsight, I didn't crimp and don't crimp most years. If your drill doesn't knock down most of your cover crop, here's what I've found in other fields. Corn and soybeans both, guess what? They like sunlight for some reason. They like sunlight. And if your cover crop with these dry springs and that cover crop just keeps standing, and your drill didn't knock it down and your corn planter didn't knock it down, then sunlight is an issue. And even if you've chemically killed the cover crop, I would still suggest there's real benefit down the road using some apparatus to get that cover crop on the ground if at all possible. Okay? And so step-by-step approach, enjoy the results. Do not expect, if you have a good no-till operation and you've done some of your homework, manage the nutrients, manage this, I do not expect a yield drag from my no-till or my no-till into cover crops. And I say that with some confidence that I don't believe it has to happen. But you do have to follow, understand the logic, understand the biology that you're dealing with and that you're changing and how that's going to change the delivery of nutrients. And from that standpoint, I have full expectation of good yields when we put this system together. All right? That's all I got.